Welcome, 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 everyone. It is such an honor to be in community with you all today as we share the important lessons that we've learned through our In Solidarity conversations and report at the forefront the experiences of girls, young women, and gender-expansive youth of color as they navigate the COVID-19 pandemic and social uprising. My name is Jamelia Harris. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am the Senior Director of Collaborative Research and Innovative Thought here at the National Crittenton. And I hope that you all are as excited and energized as I am for the wisdom and power that we're going to bear witness to in this space tonight. So before we begin, I'd just like to review a few housekeeping items. So first and foremost, we want this to be an interactive and collaborative space. So we invite you all to ask questions by typing in the Q&A box. These questions will be answered at the end of the panel discussion. Next, our participants will be muted this evening. Next, we will also be recording the entire presentation, and these recordings will be available for viewing on the National Crittenton's website. The full report will also be available on the National Crittenton's website, so you'll receive more information about that. And lastly, and most importantly, we want to just remind you all to practice self-care in this space, whether that means that you need to go and grab a glass of water or take a break from the webinar. Please do what you need to do this evening to take care of yourselves and most importantly, enjoy. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining and being in community with us this evening.
Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Kalisha DeSuze Figures. I have the honor of serving as a senior advisor to National Crittenton. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I want to kick us off by just grounding us a little bit in the who and the why. This report was a exciting collaboration between National Crittenton and the National Collaborative of Young Women's Initiatives. I come here as an advisor to Crittenton. I previously served as the director of the National Collaborative of Young Women's Initiatives. And these two organizations working together, centering young people at the top of this pandemic, was of paramount importance. And just to embed us a little bit in the why, this effort came as an effort of love, first and foremost. Organizations coming together who have always unapologetically centered girls, young women of color, gender-expansive young people. It also came from a place of deep knowledge in knowing that at times of crisis, whether it is a global pandemic, whether it is a public health crisis, whether it is state violence to Black and brown bodies across our country, that in times of crisis, girls and girls of color and gender-expansive young people are going to be disproportionately impacted. And lastly, it came from a place of trust, right? The knowledge of those systems and the way that those systemic barriers are going to reap broader, barriers during times of crisis for young people, but also trusting that young people are going to know how to name those barriers better than anyone else. So I just wanted to ground us in a little bit of the 2.5 years ago, what brought us to this moment, just knowing that we were in an unprecedented moment, in unprecedented times, and that in order to truly build, in a way out of this pandemic, that we would have to unapologetically center girls and girls of color and young people. And I'm going to hand it over to Jeanette, who's going to ground us a little bit more in the report itself.
Thank you, Kalisha. Next slide, please. So I'm Jeanette Paya-Spinoza. I'm president of National Crittenton. We wanted to, before we get started, offer thanks to our funders and partners, the support team, and all of the amazing In Solidarity fellows that came together to put this whole effort together. So you can see them on the slide. They're also noted in the report. Next slide. And next slide. So I'm going to just take you through some basic slides to set the context for the amazing and brilliant panel of In Solidarity fellows that are coming up, just so you can have some basics about the report and what the themes are before you get to see the full report. So here's some of the basics. So the conversations occurred from June to November 2021. 17 In Solidarity fellows from 15 states facilitated and participated those conversations, and 14 of the fellows continued on once the conversations were completed to help analyze the contents of the conversations and to identify major and sub themes, which you'll see in a few minutes. Over 400 cis and trans girls, young women, and gender expansive young people between the ages of 13 to 26 participated in the 15 regional conversations. Next slide. So that we had participants from 37 states participate, including Hawaii and Alaska. And as you can see on the screen, Texas, California, Tennessee, Ohio, and Florida is where most of the participants came from. And the mean age was 18, though we had participants as young as 13 and as old as 32. Next slide. Here you can see the participant breakdown of gender pronouns. Participants were asked to self-identify. And you can see the breakdown here. We had about 11% that were unknown or didn't complete the form. Next slide. And here we have race and ethnicity. Participants were encouraged to check all that applied to them. And so you can see the breakdown here. Next slide. So the report. So the report is not a traditional report. We really wanted it to be and feel like an act of intergenerational love, respect, and resistance that really seeks to honor in a true and genuine way the wisdom, courage, and fierceness of girls, young women, and gender expansive young people of color. So we made a couple decisions. The report structure is based primarily on direct quotes from participants rather than the translation that some of us adults always like to fall into doing. We made the choice to not include an executive summary because we felt like it was important to not give people a shortcut, to really push folks to really dive deeply into the meaning and the values and the experiences of the young folks. And it is, in a sense, a call to action in many different forms. Next slide. So there were 5 major themes, and each theme here and then in the report are identified by quote from one of the participants and then a short summary. So here you can see the first 3. I feel there's been like an entire pressure put on me. And here it really indicates the experience of economic instability and shifts and changes that they experienced. Theme 2, coming home to study, was very difficult. There was a lot of comment and a lot of experience that was really grounded in changes in relationships and responsibilities. Increasing in caregiving responsibility was very much present in the comments and the conversation. The third theme was, where am I going to go from here? So the switch to virtual learning, truncated rites of passage, educational journeys that were just shifted and changed, the financial strains, deep uncertainty about the future really presented itself in a series of questions like this. Where am I going to go? How is this going to affect me now and in the future? Next slide. So these 2 themes are interesting. The first, the number 4, the more connected I get, the further targeted I am. So there was a lot of conversation. I'll just remind everyone that George Floyd died on May 25th, 2020, and these conversations started in June, so very soon after. And there was a lot of emotion and reaction to the experience of ongoing systemic racism, things that we were seeing in the media and through social media. The 5th theme, youth organizing is a huge source of power. So while theme 4 indicates that it was difficult, it was stressful, it was also a huge source of power. So girls and gender expansive youth of color responded to local and national injustices by engaging in protest and community action. Next slide. So some observations. So we really encourage the reader throughout the report. There's a letter to the reader that really calls upon readers to stop and pause, not to just flip through it like we often do, but to really pause, to read, to not rush through the report, to hear the voices, to capture the feelings behind the words, and then to really be introspective and say, once you've done this, ask yourself, what actions can you take to support them in these 3 areas, which are not identified specifically as themes, but in looking overall at the comments and the conversation and how the themes weave together, it's really about supporting them in being safe from the overwhelming physical, emotional, economic, and political threats, a healing from the impacts of adultification, the increases in caregiving responsibility, complex stress, trauma, and oppression in all its forms that was layered, where the events of COVID and the social uprisings were layered on top of what already existed, and to really focus on supporting them in thriving, not just surviving, by advancing their journey towards justice and joy. So those are the observations that you'll find in the letter to the reader. And I am going to hand it back to Jamelia, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. I now have the incredible honor to moderate this panel of incredibly brilliant In Solidarity Fellows and some of my colleagues at the National Crittenton who will talk a little bit about their engagement with the In Solidarity report. And so I want to invite them to introduce themselves at this time. If we could start out with Erica.
Yes, thank you so much. Hey everyone, Erica Weems, she, her pronouns. I'm located in the Portland, Oregon area, our National Crittenton office. I am the research associate with National Crittenton, and I actually had a long journey of getting to this position. I first started out my internship with National Crittenton with my undergrad, and then transferred to doing contract work as I was transitioning to my master's degree. And actually recently, I'll be graduating with my master's with a focus on equity and social justice. So I'm just so happy to be here today, and I'll pass it off to Lauren.
Hi, hello, Lauren Mims. My pronouns are she, her. I am really excited. Just briefly, I want to as someone who is a current educator and a professor who teaches young trained teachers, I just wanted to say thanks for, I'm deeply grieving today's mass shooting, and I want to just thank everybody for holding space tonight. I know there is a lot going on in the world, and I think this report is incredibly important to elevate the voices of young folks now and forever. I am an assistant professor of educational psychology at Ball State, and I will be transitioning to NYU in the fall in the Department of Applied Psychology.
Next, we have Chloe Williams. If you could please unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Chloe Williams. I am from Sacramento, California, and it was really just a pleasure and privilege to contribute to this project, especially to write the preceding letter. Thank you so much for allowing me to have a seat at the table.
Thank you. Next, we have Monique. If you could please unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, sorry my Wi-Fi is a little bit off, so hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. My name is Monique, and I am from Idaho originally, but I currently reside on the island of Oahu. I first got involved with the National Crittenton Foundation back when I was in high school. I attended my very first In Solidarity conference when I was, I think, 17, and I have just continued to work with them since in these little small ways, but this project feels really special to me, and I'm really happy to be on board.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Aisha Khan. If you'd please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Aisha Khan, she, her pronouns, and I'm a director of projects here at National Crittenton. The bulk of my work is managing the grant work with the State of New Jersey's Rape Prevention Education Initiative, but I also have the privilege of working on the research related to the In Solidarity conversations, both as a fellow and as a staff member now.
Wonderful. So you all already started to get into a little bit about how you got involved with your work with the National Crittenton, but I am wondering, as a first introductory question for everyone here, if you could all share a little bit more about your involvement with the In Solidarity conversations, how you got involved and what was the nature of your involvement with the In Solidarity conversations, and anyone can start us out.
I can start. I was actually nominated for to be a fellow for In Solidarity by Smitha, who's a very close personal friend of mine. I'm extremely grateful to her. During the summer of 2020, I had started a mutual aid network in Sacramento following the George Floyd protests, where we were supplying clothing, food, and other resources to the community, as well as, you know, a history of writing. And I had went to my first In Solidarity conference, I believe in 2017 in Atlanta, and it was an absolutely amazing experience, and I was really excited to move forward with National Crittenton.
Thank you so much, Chloe, for sharing your experience. We hear from Erica.
Of course. My connection with National Crittenton and obviously the conversations was helping with the analyzing the data. I first started off with helping with the tech work and just outreach of the fellows, but also the participants, collecting the data with some of the team, like, Shakira and others. And then now we're here, so we're also going back and analyzing and having a great discussion about it. So,
thank you, Erica. Monique, would you like to share about your involvement within Solidarity Conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first became introduced to the Insolidarity Conversations back when I went to my very first conference. I came as an attendee and also as a speaker. I was able to speak about, I'm sorry, there's a plane. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but I came to the conference and I was able to talk about my experiences of doing youth organizing work in rural communities because I did live and grow up in Idaho, and just talking about gender and gender-based violence and domestic violence and really diving into these deep topics. I really was able to expand my understanding and knowledge of gender specifically during these conferences with me.
Thank you, Monique. Next, can we hear from Aisha?
For sure. I came into the project, like I said, as an Insolidarity fellow. I was introduced by the Young Women's Initiative, and the main bulk of my work as a fellow was coding the conversations that occurred all around the U.S. I was reading the transcripts, finding different, codes that were in line with certain quotes, and then as fellows, we collaborated with each other to kind of see whether or not we were coding things that were in line with one another. And then, as a larger National Crittenton team, we discussed some of the overarching themes that we started to see. And then when I eventually started working as a director, I had the privilege of working on the editing and the creation of the actual report. And overall, it's just been a really unique journey to be able to be on the fellow side and then now working as a staff to see it through.
Thank you. And Dr. Mims, would you like to share about your involvement with the report?
Absolutely. So I had the honor of joining this incredible team of researchers, sheroes, advocates to elevate the experiences of the over 400 girls, young women, and gender-expansive youth of color through the process of analysis and writing. Months and months of analysis and writing.
Thank you. And on that note, one of the things that I love the most about this Insolidarity report is that so much of it is grounded and rooted in the leadership and research of cis and trans girls and gender expansive young people who were really involved at every stage of the research process, from data collection to the analysis, as Dr. Mim said, which took months and months of work. And so we'd love to hear from the fellows who contributed to the bulk of this work. If you could share 1 to 2 themes of the report that resonate with you, that you think community leaders and stakeholders should take into consideration, and maybe share a little bit about why that resonates with you. And so I'll open the floor for anyone who wants to dive in.
I think that one of the themes that resonated most with me personally is that the young girls and gender expansive youth have really taken it upon themselves to not only identify the problems socially and structurally, but to also begin to strategy towards problem solving. I have found that while I was going through and annotating and processing everything that was in front of me, the hope was not with the institutions and the public services that are set up to serve and or protect us, but it is actually within ourselves, within our communities, and within our neighbors, especially those of us who fall into the youth category.
Thank you, Chloe. Monique or Aisha, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Something that I saw again and again, regardless of which region the conversation was happening in, was the need for accessible services and financial relief. And I know that sounds really vague, but as you read this report, you're going to be able to see how this manifests very specifically in the lives of young folks. And for example, they were and are losing jobs or having family members lose their jobs, and they're having to step up in ways that is unprecedented for them. And whether it's providing childcare or, for their younger siblings, or going straight into the workforce, or deferring like their freshman year of college, like all these things were having implications on their mental health and well-being. And reading their quotes was really just like illuminating this whole other like feeling that it kind of like validated a lot of the feelings that we saw around in our own communities that were happening across the entire US. And what I heard as I read through it was that folks saw that if there wasn't going to be accessible services like childcare or college assistance, and there had to be a balanced way that through government-led assistance, government-led financial assistance. And the 1 or 2 relief stipends that they received, they weren't enough for the families, they weren't enough for the youth. And even when they were distributed, there was like very much an unequal distribution. The undocumented, the immigrants, and even students weren't able to access that relief. And it's really like a gateway for them to relieve a lot of the stress and empower them to be able to reach their potential. And it was sad in a way to read through all those papers, all those quotes and stuff, but it was also really, I don't know, uplifting to see that it was on paper for others to read.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Monique, is there anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I completely agree with what Chloe and Aisha added. I would also just love to add that in theme 3, there is the concern of future academics and professional careers and how that affects people in terms of COVID and how it changed the trajectory of a lot of people's lives. I kind of want to just go deeper into that just because I think that a huge part of that is also just experiencing housing instability. Only because, at least for me, I don't want to speak on other people's experiences, but for my experience, that was the biggest issue. And it was something that I had experienced with a lot of people in my life and a lot of people that I knew. And I just really want that to be highlighted too, because a lot of people were put out of housing due to the pandemic, not just because of, whether it's being kicked out of your college dorms or like literally not having to elaborate on that, but that was just something that I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monique. So this, as we shared, a lot of this work was really an intergenerational labor of love and mutual respect in young adults and our youth workers and staff here at the National Crittenton and beyond, engaging collaboratively together and taking on this research. And so we'd love to hear from you all about what advice would you give to adults and youth workers who are considering taking up similar research endeavors with and alongside young people. And so I'm going to open the floor up to anyone who would like to respond to that question.
Briefly, as a researcher, I've noticed when folks begin to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic or social uprising, they tend to reduce the experiences of youth, particularly youth of color, down to a very few number of words, and kind of say that we all navigate and experience the same pandemic differently. And so I think that what I'd like adults who are researching to know is we have 74 pages. And then at some point in time, we probably had over 100 pages of insight. And so I think it's really important that researchers center the perspectives of young folks from start to finish. And when we say start, beginning when researchers have that idea, that research idea, throughout the data collection and analysis process, bringing young folks in as facilitators, sitting at their table, centering the perspectives of the participants within the research, and what themes you identify and how you present the report. I think it's incredibly important not to just do research on young folks, but to do research with and in partnership. And some of that actually it takes a big process of kind of stepping away as a researcher, and allowing, and not even allowing, but like allowing yourself this, to be, it might be, an uncomfortable way based on the way that academia is set up, but the true answers and kind of the rich data and the report, it came from listening and learning. It didn't come from putting adult lenses on or trying to distill down the very rich and complicated experiences to 5 words. And so I think that that's really something that I would love that adults who are doing that research to deeply understand and practice in their work.
Wow, thank you so much. That is a full word. Erica, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, highlighting completely what Lori was saying. I think just little things of being mindful of words that you use, the environment that you bring, and also being flexible and just being patient with the process. I know as researchers that we want to just quickly jump into the work, but we also learn that this is going to be a long ride, but just know that there's going to be a golden gate at the end with hopefully some rewarding things, not only for yourself, but for the person or community that you're researching. So.
Thank you. And we'd love to hear from our fellows. I see Chloe and Monique both unmuted at the same time. So whichever one wants to go first.
Monique, after you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I just wanted to add one quick thing. I think that you should be really intentional when you are working with young people, especially when it comes to compensation. I think that the work that young people do is incredibly valuable, and when you're working with them, you should absolutely be compensated them for the work that they do and for everything that they contribute, especially your whole, whatever you want to say. I don't know. That's all I wanted to say.
I totally agree and hadn't have even thought of that. Thank you for making that point, Monique. What I think was really important to me reflecting on all of this is that it's really important to humanize people and to humanize the experiences of people through research. I think one of the most profound and appealing parts of this project to me going into it was that it was qualitative research. And so not just looking at the quantity of people that are having a certain experience in unprecedented times, but to measure what is the result of that, what quality of life does it produce, and what can we project is the potential of their quality of life if we implement, strategy and empathy towards creating equity structurally and systemically.
Yeah, can I add one more thing to what Chloe was saying, just to highlight, she talked about qualitative and quantitative, right? Like some folks, when you're going into the community, they may not know those terminologies. And so I think that's one thing to also highlight, like being able to learn and teach in community. So we're also just transferring that energy on. And so folks are able to go out and conduct their own research in the future. So thank you, Chloe, for highlighting that.
Thank you. Aisha, did you want to add anything?
No, I thought everything that everybody was said was on point. And just to reiterate, like I really appreciated National Crittenton's involvement with youth at every level. And to Lauren's point, from the get-go, I felt like they were telling the story or helping us tell our own story and not hijacking it and like trying, as Jeanette said earlier, to take quotes and like retell it in a different way. This is something I just hadn't seen in other research endeavors, and it's something I hope to see emulated for other similar projects.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So for our next question, this report, of course, has so many important implications that we hope will affect meaningful change in the lives of cis and trans girls and gender expansive young people across the nation. And so it'd be incredible to hear from you all. What is one hope that you have for changes that might come about as a result of this report? Anyone can start us off with that question.
One hope that I have for changes is that we are able to look outside of ourselves and to recognize that struggles are different for everybody. And a lot of the time, the solutions that we have are for people, they're set in place for people that already have access. For instance, socially distant learning implies that somebody has access to technology, to internet, to all of these really first world privileges that not all of us are afforded, and it makes that gap expand. When people are not educated because they don't have access, they are continuing that, I guess it's a hot button term, but generational curse of poverty and of a lack of access. And so I think that my main hope is that we're able to have a new perspective on what are the struggles that are next door to us and among our neighbors.
Thank you, Chloe. Anyone else like to respond to that question?
Something I think that this report is really going to highlight, which we all know today, COVID is community, but not only just the sense of community, but community with action. I hope that folks are able to read this and really read those quotes and embody how those folks were feeling. I actually was rereading the whole report before this meeting, and I just each time reading each quote, I just felt and it was just so powerful. So I hope folks really take it away, just understand you can have community, but when there is really a good intention, you're able to put action towards it and make a change, and it just continues to trickle on. So.
As I read, I'm reminded of Maya Angelou. She had a quote and it talked about take up the battle, take it up, it's yours. And she says, so fall, so try, so pick it up, pick up the battle and make it a better world just where you are. Yes, and it can be better and it must be better, but it is up to us. And as I was reading, I kept thinking about how am I going to pick up the battle? And each time I read, there's a different way that I see that I can pick up the battle. And so I hope folks are able to sit with the over 70 pages and really think towards that idea of trying it, seeing it, picking it up, picking up the battle and making it a better world where they are.
If it's okay, I just also wanted to add that one thing that I really hope changes is that we stop being so dissociated from these issues. These are people who live in our communities, in our same zip codes, in our same school districts, who are struggling with access, with trauma, with the ability to function just from the weight of what's going on around them. I feel like a lot of our society is built on kind of being exploitative towards trauma rather than being action-oriented and solution-oriented, and recognizing that these are the people that live among us with these human experiences.
Thank you. Aisha, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I totally agree with what everything was said. And I mean, as you read this report, you're going to see how resilience just pops out of this, out of the papers, really. It's really amazing. And I don't like using the word resilience so much because it's always thrown around with the response to COVID. But what I want folks, I guess, to take away is that a reminder that COVID didn't create the need for resilient women. It just shone a light on the resilience that girls and young women and gender expansive people were already fiercely showing every day at home, at work, across their community. And what I hope comes out of this report is that we can finally give tangible relief, like financial assistance, like accessible resources, instead of always just expecting resilience as the norm for girls and gender expansive youth.
Thank you. Monique, would you like to add anything?
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. To be completely honest, I don't know if there's one
Oh no, I think we're
can say
losing
I
you.
want to see come out of the way. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, you're
Okay,
we
I'm
can hear
cutting
you.
in and out.
Yes, you're cutting in and out, but we can hear you now.
I just hope that I really just hope that people read this, and I hope that they really understand that this is a time that is really pivotal for young people, and that our experiences can really give a lot of detail as to what social issues are going on for everybody. And I just hope that people will continue to work with young people and continue to do this type of work with young people, and that we can just, see more changes. I don't know. I want to see changes on a bigger scale. I would love to see more legislation and policy changes. We hope.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Monique. So our final question for the evening, and again, we want to remind everyone that we're going to turn over to Q&A, so please be sure to submit your questions via the Q&A option. Our final question, what are the next steps for In Solidarity conversations? And Erica or Lauren, feel free to respond.
Lauren, can you let me go ahead? Okay, kindly. For the next steps for In Solidarity Conversations, we're actually looking at In Solidarity Conversations number 2. We're actually going to reach out to the participants from our last conversation and then just simply ask them, like, how are you doing? And just also use that data to have a next step within making more change and changing the narrative. So we're in the process of sending out a survey. So we'll have a qualitative and a quantitative side of the data, and then hopefully we'll see everything come full together the following year after we're able to analyze everything mid-summer, fall. So yeah. And then Laura, if you want to add anything that I missed, please.
That's great. Yep.
Thank you. So we do have some questions from the audience. Our first question is for Lauren, actually. What were some of the sub-themes that came out regarding the impact of the protests in response to police violence?
I'm so excited for you to get the report. But broadly, throughout the conversations, many shared the difficulties of coping with racism and discrimination in the differing environments where they would kind of go through the day. So in schools, in the neighborhood, and on social media. And they were dramatically impacted by police violence. There was what we heard to get time and time again was this constant refrain of, I can't be safe anywhere. And this feeling, again, going back, that feeling of safety. So for example, one Asian American young person said that they started to see more and more racism directly against people who looked exactly like me. So then when I'd go into public, it was almost as an extra guard up. And so we heard about this extra guard up. The additionally kind of a sub-theme of watching the violent viral videos, they had a tremendous impact for the folks. They frequently used phrases like helpless, angry, or living in fear. One quote I think a lot about is a young person who said that after George Floyd, that I just felt my mental health like a big shift. I was getting really depressed. I didn't want to get out of bed. I had to take a social media break because I felt like even though it was important for me to see how we were treated in this country, I just couldn't keep looking at it again and again every day. And it was getting harder and harder every day to see people being murdered. So the in-person, some talked about living in places where they were being surveilled in the grocery store, or that they were in fear of going on a walk. And so you had this kind of the cascading effects of these experiences, where many said, I'm just exhausted. And also that in response to that ties into the idea of that community organizing, so that youth organizing was this huge source of power, and that liberation was tied together. And that was the important course of action. So hopefully that answers it broadly. But thankfully, there's about 30 pages to dig into to really I think fully understand some of that. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Our next question, which any of our panelists feel free to respond to this. What was the most challenging part of the process of coding and writing the report?
I would say just doing it, honestly, going through just what people are going through in real times, and just hearing people, you know, really pour their heart out, and express not only personal, interpersonal, community, but collective trauma, and trying to navigate through it, and to also it's like almost like itemizing people's pain to go through, you know, who feels the pressure to take care of their family despite being the youngest member, who feels uncertain of, you know, their future, who is having an identity crisis and feels fear on a daily basis just based off of the, you know, the things that they're consuming and witnessing around them. It was very hard. It was hard to get to sleep some nights, you know, thinking that so many people were feeling the same way, and the only way that it was coming out was, you know, by being prompted and asked, you know.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Chloe. Would anyone else like to respond to this question?
No, I think Chloe hit the nail on the head. It was definitely hard to read through the quotes. There were transcripts on transcripts that we were reading, and it's one thing to, you know, be in the conversation, sort of feed off the energy of others and feel like, you know, it's a good, like, wholesome space. But it was another thing to, you know, be in, you know, your COVID apartment and be reading through the transcripts and, you know, feel like the intense pressure that, you know, COVID is really hitting our country really hard. But in the same vein, it was we had really good support from the National Crittenton team, and really appreciate the video calls we would do to go over the coding and stuff. So it was a good balance.
Thank you. Next question is, how long did the entire project take?
It's a great question. The process was long, but we started, it was June 2020 with our first couple conversations. And then we ended about November 2020 of that year. And then we did take that full year to analyze a majority of the data, and then obviously to write it. And here we are presenting it to you today, and then with a release later on. So approximately about 2 years, year and a half-ish. So.
Thank you, Erica. We have another question from the audience. When young people talked about the healing well-being they're seeking, what are they saying? Are they referring to traditional therapy or opportunities to be in community with other young people or cultural forms of healing? Can you maybe say a little bit more about the types of healing and well-being pathways that young people are seeking?
I found in my research that because the trauma was a community and collective trauma, there was a need for collective and community healing. I know that a lot of young people were very interested in hearing who among their peers felt the same way, and had the same experiences, as to not feel so alone, and not feel so isolated in navigating such difficult social and structural challenges.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add to what Chloe shared?
Just briefly, I think all of the above. So traditional therapy, opportunities to be with young folks, cultural healing. In addition to participating in, many young folks created spaces, and those spaces could have been in person, or the virtual spaces that were created. I think one important thing is also that there was a specific instance where a healing space was created, and it actually ended up being a space that was taken over by white supremacists. And so that's included in the report, but that it was a young person talking about how someone released the location on social media, and it became it was moved from a cathartic space to a space that was quickly under threat. So I think it's also important to bring in that the different ways that they sought healing, as well as thinking about the larger context.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mims. And our final question from the audience this evening: will there be any more virtual ways to participate with In Solidarity conversations? And also, where exactly can we locate the report? And I'll ask this to Erica.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there actually will be, for In Solidarity 2, we will have additional virtual conversations. We're unsure of how many. We're just, again, we're going through and just trying to figure out if we're going to do the same regions or a different approach. And so, yes, there will be some coming. And then to answer the final question, where can you locate the report? It will be on our website, and we will share the link shortly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erica. The report link will be shared in the chat, just to clarify that. And so as a closing offering to the space, we would love to invite Chloe Williams, In Solidarity fellow who drafted this powerful letter that began the report, to read this report in the space as a call to action for everyone here. And so Chloe, please grace us with this beautiful letter.
Thank you so much. I'm very flattered. It makes me blush. I will be reading from my phone, so I do apologize if I do have any hiccups along the way. Some things are just the right thing to do, without an audience or a call to action outside of oneself. Some things challenge our integrity simply by posing the question within ourselves, am I doing the right thing? Most often, this introspective query meets us in the face of adversity, and we find ourselves at a crossroad of instant gratification and long-term satisfaction. In many cases, instant gratification manifests as convenience, the path of ease. Instant gratification urges us to indulge. It prompts us to be individualistic, self-serving, and entices us to clear the path to greener grass, so long as one does not look back and see the collateral damage of their decision. Long-term satisfaction often presents itself as a challenge. It urges us to be ambitious and critical, to face a problem head-on. Long-term satisfaction requires one to think of themselves and others facing obstacles and strategizing to overcome them. This, for obvious reason, is the path less walked. It is also the path most commonly walked by women of color who, in the face of adversity, do not simply acknowledge strife, but are compelled to investigate who else is suffering silently and working tirelessly to amplify their voices, build community, and leverage strength in numbers to procure change. The women of color that represent the fellows conducting the research behind this report have committed to the long-term satisfaction of working towards equitable change. The initiative taken by women of color to gather, organize, and conduct research to investigate not a quantity of people, but the quality of their lives. But the quality of their lives they live has the potential to move us forward in improving our social structures and facilitate our lived experience. During a worldwide series of crisis in a country with minimal relief issued from its political leaders, working class and student women of color took it upon themselves to work towards the relief their officials failed to provide a country in need. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the US distributed minimal financial relief, issuing only up to 2 stimulus checks, publicly performed gratitude for essential workers, going as far as calling them heroes, but failing to provide any additional care, resources, support to compensate them for their sacrifice, and often fell short of adequate pay or fair working conditions. Accommodations made were short-sighted and reflected ideas cultivated from a place of privilege. Social distancing policies and procedures for work and school were not accessible to those who needed accommodations the most. Over the course of the study, our fellows discovered that those most impacted by disparity were continuously despaired and neglected, even as they were promised equity, change, and a solution-oriented approach. This report is a call to action. The efforts of women of color have produced a key to map out and identify the problems within our social systems and structures and suggest where we can implement change. This report is a guide for future policy recommendations so we can begin to strategize against structural and systemic oppression by implementing structural and systemic solutions. This report codes the comments reflecting the lived experiences of women and gender-expansive folks of color across the US and paints a picture of disproportionate impacts the COVID-19 pandemic has had on these demographics. This report is demystifying. It calls out the highlights where we have been let down systemically, structurally, and the poverty, despair, helplessness, and lack of accessibility that has been left behind and seemingly forgotten. The illumination provided by our findings is a vessel of hope, a hope for us to be seen, heard, understood, and empathized with, to be treated as a neighbor or a relative in need rather than a throwaway in the eyes of society. It is with great pleasure and gratitude that myself and the fellows I have worked closely with are able to pass the torch of long-term satisfaction. We challenge you to understand the problems in our systems and structures and face them head on. We challenge you not only to consider yourself, but your neighbors. We challenge you to ask yourself the same question that compelled us all to put our heads together to do what we activists call the work. Am I doing the right thing in this situation? It is our hope that this leads you to meet us on the path less walked so we can heal together with equity as equals and make our way back home. Sincerely, Chloe Williams.
Whew. Just snaps all around. Thank you so much, Chloe, for all of the wisdom and brilliance that you imparted through the letter. When I first read that letter, I was sitting in a coffee shop and I just had chills running through my body, and to hear you read and lift that up into the space, it just holds so much power for me, and I'm sure everyone in this audience. So I have nothing to say after that. I love to end on your words and to close the space out and ask everyone that we heed Chloe's words as a call to action of what is expected of all of us and in terms of just our collective commitment to advancing the liberation of cis and trans girls and gender expansive young people across this country. And so thank you again, Chloe, for your participation and for sharing your brilliance. And thank you so much to all of our panelists, to our audience for joining us this evening. We would, of course, love to stay in connection with you all. And so we have some of our contact information here. Feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have questions about the report or future research endeavors that will be taken up by the Crit team at the National Crittenton. And of course, please stay on the lookout for future information about the next iteration of In Solidarity conversations, as well as the In Solidarity report, which will be on our new website. And so thank you so much again for joining us this evening. This has been so incredibly powerful.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.